Hello everybody, my name is Oksana Afitska and I'm an associate professor in applied linguistics at Lancaster University. I'm really happy to be here with you today and to be presenting to you on the topic of language cognition and student performance in subject classrooms, scaffolding learning through language. I would like to thank the organizers of this conference for the invitation. It is a pleasure to be here with you and to be presenting for you. I would like to start my presentation by sharing with you some data on the number of learners who don't speak English as their first language in the United Kingdom. So here you have got the national census data from 2023, and I'm comparing it to the national census data from other years, like a year back and then 10 years back or even 20 years back. So you will see that currently in the UK, over 20% of school-aged population speaks English not as their first language. And if we break it down further, we will see that in secondary schools, the number of children who don't speak English as their first language is just over 18%, and in primary schools it is just over 22%. If we compare this data to the data back in 2000, we will see that the number of pupils who don't speak English as their first language has more than doubled in the UK. So that poses challenges for effective education of these learners and for teacher training. So my slide also shows that every single secondary school actually will have a learner who doesn't speak English as their first language, and 75% of primary schools will have children who don't speak English as their first language, and among themselves these children speak over 350 different languages, so which is again another challenge for educators, because it's not easy to work with children or just to invite, for example, a teaching assistant who speaks the language of the child, because there may be many different children with many different linguistic backgrounds in the classroom. Okay, so what it means for those children then to be studying in the English language classroom when English is not their first language. So here we have got two examples of the science sort of knowledge. One is from the science textbook and the other one is from the science test paper. So what it actually means for these children and for everybody really to learn science, for example. So when we learn science, we think about two things. First of all, we need to think about the language of input, so the language that's being used to communicate the content to us. So in our case, it's specifically the language of disciplinary input, so language of science, for example. And in addition to that, we're thinking about all the visual, audio, and gestural and spatial devices that can support that understanding. And the second thing that, of course, once you understand the language of the input, then that information converts into the knowledge about the subject. So demonstrating knowledge in science, therefore, equals knowledge of the subject matter and ability to express that knowledge in the language that everybody understands, so using the language because that's how we communicate. So when we talk about then language in the classroom and use of appropriate language, we are dealing with slightly different type of language than the sort of everyday type of language. Jim Cummins, back in 1979, defined these two types of language as basic interpersonal communicative skills and academic language proficiency. So when we talk about basic interpersonal communicative skills, we talk about the language that is used every day by children on the playground, with their friends, with their families. So this is basically, everyday interactive language. But then we also have another type of language, which is helping learners to develop their cognitive skills in the classrooms. So when learners are studying in the classroom, they are also dealing with specific language, so disciplinary language or language that is used to promote cognition. And that language is different from everyday language. That is the language that helps learners to express their thinking and to not just express their thinking, but also to comprehend what is being spoken to them or what they're reading from the books. So when we talk about academic language, some of academic language is shared among subjects. So for example, the language of knowing, thinking, reading and writing, such words as explore, express, define, combine, describe, these are academic words that are used in many different disciplines. So, however, we also have subject-specific language, so subject-specific terminology, for example, language of maths, language of science, language of history, or language of literature. So that language, this specific language, is acquired by children in school context. It is unlikely that they are going to acquire that language while they are, just exposed to everyday communication at home. Okay, so the progression then happens from the basic interpersonal communicative skills to cognitive academic language proficiency. The more the demands of academic language become higher and higher, the further students progress through the education system. So the higher forms or levels they go to or grades, the more academic language they will be experiencing. So that takes us also to the concept of developing higher order thinking skills. Higher order thinking skills are developed through language. So they actually go hand in hand, language and cognition. So here you have got the 21st century Bloom's taxonomy, which represents the sort of stages of thinking that people are engaging with. So the sort of the lower level thinking ability is remembering, understanding, and then higher ones are going to be applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. So remembering and understanding and recalling, for example, that is one type of cognitive engagement, and that requires sort of recall of information, right? So when we talk about analyzing, evaluating, and creating, that is where language becomes absolutely crucial, because we are trying to express really complex cognitive processes through language. So let's have a look at the components of academic language proficiency. And here we will be talking about academic vocabulary, academic language, academic grammar, and academic discourse. So in terms of academic vocabulary, so what do we mean by that? I've already started to introduce that concept to you. So here we talk about subject-specific or technical vocabulary, such as evaporate, food chain, radius, square, revolution, verse, rhyme. So you can see there's words from different disciplinary areas. We are also talking about cross-disciplinary stating, cross-disciplinary sort of vocabulary, such as stating, thinking, processing, and doing types of vocabulary, such as evaluate, describe, indicate, criteria, and section, and so on. So words that are used across various disciplines. So let's have a look at this quote here. So it emphasizes the importance of academic vocabulary knowledge. So it says, the danger is in over-focusing on individual words, particularly if that focus is on accumulating definitions to do well on tests. So basically this quote says is that teachers tend to over-focus on individual words because these are the words that are going to be appearing in the text. But that is not going to be helpful to learners, because you shouldn't be just teaching or focusing on recall of individual words. It is the cognition that you want to develop. You want to develop students' ability to use language freely to express complex thoughts. So individual words are to some extent going to help learners sort of interpret the meaning of the test items, for example, but they're not going to advance their thinking and ability to express themselves as far. So when this happens, connected and in-depth understandings of content concepts and practice in disciplinary thinking get pushed aside. Learners must be able to work on their skills of communication. So that's exactly the point I was making. They need to be able to communicate their ideas rather than just to be able to recall individual subject-specific technical words. So here are some examples of academic word lists, if in case you were wondering what these words are. So you can have a look at Coxhead 2000, and there is a full academic word list in Academic Corpus, and it gives you the list of the words that are defined as or considered to be academic words. So you can analyze classroom discourse, for example, or textbooks for the type of language that is being used, as we will see soon in this presentation. Okay, so here on this slide, you have got some more examples of frequently used terms and tactics for building academic sentences. So here we are sort of looking at more at the discourse level of the types of words that could be used to help learners express their ideas in more sort of complex, advanced ways. And the second table shows you frequently used terms and tactics for building academic sentences. Oh, that's continuation, actually. There are some more examples here. Again, this is from Cox Head, a new academic word list. So the second cluster then of what defines academic language proficiency is academic grammar. So what are the features of academic grammar? How do we know that we are using appropriate grammar in the higher forms, for example? So the features of academic grammar are long sentences with multiple clauses. So such sentences will include such words as also, because, before, if, despite, etc. The second feature of academic grammar is the use of passive voice. So the radius is plugged, for example. The third one is modal verbs. So the modal verbs in academic discourse are often used for hedging, for softening the degree of certainty in the sentence or in the message. So, for example, we can say something is or something might be. Okay, a particular finding demonstrates such and such, or a particular finding might demonstrate such and such. So the third one is next feature of academic grammar is nominalization. So turning verbs or adjectives into noun phrases. For example, revolution from the revolve, cancellation from the cancel. The next feature is condensed complex messages. So, for example, photosynthesis implies a complex process, yet it is expressed in one word. So if you're a biology teacher and you're telling students about photosynthesis, once you've explained the whole process to them, which will take you a few minutes, then you can just use one single word to express the entire process or an entire phenomenon, which is a feature of delivering condensed complex messages. So, and then the last feature is clarity. I mean, not last, but one of the major features of academic grammar is clarity. So ability to efficiently express ideas without overcomplicating them. And all the features I've just described to you are the ones that are helping to achieve that clarity. So the next feature of academic language proficiency is academic discourse. We use grammar and vocabulary to construct our academic discourse, but academic discourse goes beyond sentence level. So when we talk about grammar, we are sort of looking at how language is used at a sentence level, but our sentences combined together into the text, into the ideas that we're trying to communicate. So here we're looking at the academic discourse. So this is academic discourse is academic ways of talking and thinking. Okay, so academic discourse supports development of higher order thinking skills, and higher order thinking skills are developed through the use of academic discourse. The academic who has looked into the ways of capturing and analyzing and working with academic discourse is Christiane Dalton-Puffer, and she proposed the construct of cognitive discourse functions. So cognitive discourse functions, as I said, was developed by Christiane Dalton-Puffer, the academic professor at Vienna University in Austria, to realize the interface between subject-specific cognitive learning goals with the linguistic representations they receive in classroom interaction. So cognitive discourse functions are verbalizations of cognitive processes. So basically we are thinking in our head, and we are talking, we are saying, we're verbalizing our thinking process, and that is done through cognitive discourse functions, or what Dalton-Puffer defines as cognitive discourse functions. Cognitive discourse functions reflect the communicative intentions of discourse participants in the teaching and learning event, and cognitive discourse function provide a connection between thinking and speaking and writing. So theoretical grounding behind cognitive discourse functions, they are informed by systemic functional linguistics, which considers the purpose of language is to represent thought, and then it's also informed by education pedagogy and cognitive processing, the Bloom's taxonomy that we already looked at. Cognitive discourse functions are defined into 7 types, and each type has got a group of members as is indicated in this table. So they are categorize, define, describe, evaluate, explain, explore, and report. So these are the types, and then in each type there are sort of clusters of activities or sort of behaviors that represent that type. So for example, if we look at explain, such behaviors will be clustered as explain when students are dealing or teacher is dealing with explain, reason, express, cause and effect. So communicative intention is I tell you about the causes or motives of X. And so that will be then coded as explain. Okay, so now let's have a look at the example from my own research data, where I looked at science lessons in primary classrooms where there is high density of learners speaking English as an additional language, and I wanted to see sort of what linguistic demands are happening in these classrooms for these learners. So first thing I did is I analyzed classroom discourse. I recorded and transcribed the interactions between teachers and students in the classrooms. And on this slide, you can see the transcript of that interaction, teacher-pupil interaction. And on the right-hand side, there is notes space where I'm coding various occurrences of cognitive discourse functions. So whenever explanation or description or evaluation happens, that is coded in a transcript. So what in addition to that, I also looked at other features of grammar and academic grammar and academic vocabulary in the classroom discourse. So what I have found out is that passive voice was adequately used and was relatively common, which is good because we would expect that because this is a feature of academic language. Use of modal verbs was also relatively common, but mostly used by the teacher, which is okay because it is still primary school level. Teacher was modeling language a lot and directing language. So that was common. So for example, the teacher would be using prompts like when, because, speak in full sentences, and the teacher was offering sentence starters to support English language learners with language learning. So cognitive discourse functions progression was really nice in this classroom because the teacher did go through the lower order thinking skills to the higher order thinking skills gradually as discourse was unfolding. So it started from describe. The teacher wanted to talk to learners how what are ice cubes and how they're made. So it started from description, then it progressed to definition, so define, then it progressed to explain, and then it progressed to the function of reporting, and finally the function of exploring. So this is a really nice sort of progression of this cognitive thinking about ice and how ice is made, and also into the use of language that demands that ability to express your understanding. So overall, we can say that in that particular lesson that I analyzed, the higher order thinking skills development was well supported. Okay, so the other thing that I also looked at the moment, just before now, we looked at the types of knowledge, the types of language that is used in the classroom discourse when teacher and learner interacts. I also wanted to have a look at what language is used in the test papers. So when learners sit their science tests, what sort of language they have to deal with before they produce their own response. And again, I looked the same sort of coding categories here. I looked at academic language, I looked at academic discourse, and I looked at academic vocabulary. And here is an example of the test item from the ICADSS test paper in England. So this is my coding scheme. You can see here that on the left-hand side, I have got the questions, the language of the questions, and then I have got the coding categories of academic vocabulary, scientific vocabulary, and then I analyzed the discourse looking at the syntax. So academic grammar in discourse features, which are clauses, passive voice, modal verbs, nominalization, and condensed complex meanings. And I counted the numbers of occurrences of these features in every single test item. So after that, across various topics, you can see I have got three 5, 6, 7, 8 topics and from the science test papers, and all the numbers collected from the wording of individual test items in terms of vocabulary, grammar, and discourse were collated in this table, but I needed to condense them further into just one category, which is overall sort of academic language demand of the task, which is a red line at the bottom of this table. And then that was entered into the analytical framework. So you can see here on this in green color on this slide, academic language demand. So high, medium, or low, depending on the complexity of grammar and vocabulary and discourse features that were identified in individual test items. So we wanted to see if that was a feature that affected performance of students on those tests. We also looked at the question length. The question length was measured by the number of unique words occurring in the question. So it's not the length per se, it's how many new words or different words, unique words are in the sentence. We also looked at the use of the visuals. We wanted to see if there is a picture, is it helping learners to answer the question correctly? And we also looked at the need for learners to produce language as part of their response as opposed to ticking the boxes. So the findings are here combined with the paper that we have already published and the paper that is upcoming. So here are the findings. Non-native speakers of English language are capable in answering conceptually demanding questions as capable as their English native speaking peers. Non-native English speaking learners are as capable in answering long questions as their English native speaking peers. So it's not the length of the question that is the feature. Non-native speakers of English perform much worse compared to their English native speaking peers when the question contains high academic language demands for comprehension. So basically, if the question is difficult for them grammatically, lexically, and discourse level, then they are finding it difficult to even understand the question itself. So non-native English speakers of English do significantly worse than English native speakers when the response require active language production compared to when they have to be answered passively. So as I said, when the learners had to actually express their cognition understanding through language, non-native speakers of English language struggled much more than English native speakers of language. Non-native speakers of English struggle significantly when assessed on specific scientific vocabulary in comparison to native speakers. Again, scientific vocabulary is more difficult, more demanding to non-native speakers. Non-native speakers of English seem to be hindered by the presence of visuals requiring direct input. So when they are less likely to answer correctly than if the question had no visual at all. So sometimes visual actually interfered with learners' ability to answer the question correctly, particularly when they needed to interact with that visual in some way as part of their response. So what are the key implications for practice? Well, the key implication for practice, number one, so we have found out that non-native speakers perform poorly in mainstream classrooms, not only because they lack academic language preparation, but also because their teachers lack preparation to teach them this language, because teachers are not necessarily trained in the need or trained or understand the need for actually helping learners to acquire that language. For if you're a science teacher, you use vocabulary, you use the language naturally, so you don't think about it that much, but actually learners do need help with it. So here is an example, some examples of learners struggling to understand that vocabulary in the test items. So the learner has highlighted feature, penguin, and environment in the question, which is almost half of the words in that sentence. So it's impossible for them to answer the question. And here is another example when the student did answer the question, but we can see that the student used the words that are not scientific, that are not accepted as the correct answer. So the fluffy tummy is the feature of a penguin that helps it stay warm in the environment. But however, fluffy tummy are not the right words. And so learner didn't have that vocabulary. Learner should have said feathers, right? But that word wasn't there for that student. So we need to make sure, what is the implication? We need to make sure that teachers teach and elicit academic and scientific vocabulary from students actively throughout the schooling process so that they can better prepared for the secondary school. Key implication for practice number 2, is we want to allow non-native speakers of English to work on development of their skills of communication that connected and in-depth, and that develops a connected and in-depth understanding of content concepts, and practice and practice and help them to be thinking so that they are continuously developed. So we want to support learners in that development of communicative competencies for academic purposes, so that students have continuous opportunities to do so in the classrooms, so that they really develop the skills that they need, not just memorize individual scientific words. So I hope that was helpful to you and of interest. I'm looking forward to the questions. So thank you very much for listening.